Hey, 2 games in a row for the Penguins with 7 goals, and 2 games in a row the Penguins chase Igor Shesterkin at PPG Paints Arena. This time, it's even more of a laugher. Actually, last time wasn't a laugher at all. No one was laughing until the third period. This time, we could all relax a little bit for the final 20 minutes, and hey, the Rangers didn't try anything stupid either. What's wrong with them? Just kidding, of course. I'm glad that it was no drama, except for a nice Malkin goal to cap things off. 7 different goal scorers for the Penguins. A couple more points for Sidney Crosby. He's at 200 postseason points for his career, breathing down Jaromir Jagr's neck for, I think, what is that, 7th or 6th on the all-time list? He's right up there. Again, it was his line leading the way, but this was more about team performance, and it was good to see all those contributors. A couple of defensemen scoring in Friedman and Matheson, and then you had Chris Letang assisting on a Danton Heinen goal. Yes, Heinen connects for the second consecutive game. Maybe he can get a little bit hot. That would be nice, especially since he's playing with Malkin most of the time. I mentioned Malkin gets one. Jake Gensel continues to pump him in. That's goals in 4 in a row for number 59. And outside of a little bit of a shaky start for the Pens in the opening 5 minutes, maybe, that's about all you can really complain about tonight. When we're down to nitpicking 5-minute segments, you know things are going well. So my name is Matt Gajtka. This is Pittsburgh Postgame, and we're getting on a roll here, aren't we? Much like the Penguins are. An unexpected but much welcomed surge here in the postseason. The Penguins have found their game, no doubt, and they lead the Rangers 3-1 in this first-round series. If I had any guts at all, I would have picked the Penguins in 5 or 6 at the start of the playoffs, but I decided not to do predictions anymore. I don't even turn in an NCAA basketball bracket these days. I just don't really feel the need to make predictions, but you know what? Going into the final couple of weeks of the season, I felt like I wanted the Penguins to play the Rangers. Everyone was talking Panthers. Let them drop down and play the Panthers. I entertained thoughts of that nature after the Penguins lost 3 in a row to the Rangers, and it looked like the Rangers were a much improved team late in the regular season, because they were. It wasn't just a look, it was a reality. And the Penguins were not improving. They were on the downward trajectory. But with a veteran team like the Penguins and also a young team like the Rangers, you had 2 X factors there that both of them, it seems, are turning in Pittsburgh's favor as we turn the calendar page over into May and got the playoffs going. So want to let you know that you can chip in your comments here. Waiting for our usual suspects. We have Gaming with Gio. Good to see him again. He says masterful, and it certainly was by the Pens. Pittsburgh Sports All the Time says, if you are the Rangers coach, which goalie do you start in Game 5? I'll get to that in just a moment, so just keep it right here. And Walt Flanagan, our good friend and frequent commenter, he opines, saying, this series is amazing. I was so wrong and so happy about it. Hey, you and me both, brother. I think we were, 2 weeks ago talking about, well, how can the Penguins save face in these playoffs? And is it possible for them to give us any kind of a decent run to enjoy here in the springtime? Might be the last ride, as we all know, for the big 3, for Crosby and Malkin and Letang. And it still might be the last ride. But they're giving reason to believe that maybe the Fenway Sports Group should shell out a few more bucks and maybe a couple more years than they previously thought. I don't want to say these guys had something to prove to that group, but they kind of did, right? Coming into this postseason and going into what will be a very pivotal summer one way or another for the Pittsburgh Penguins Hockey Club. And it might not be up to Ron Hextall or Brian Burke. It could go up further than that. We don't really know how this new group operates. So I think there was a future on the line here and still is a future on the line for the Penguins. And hey, we've seen them take a 3-1 series lead against the Rangers and not win the series 8 years ago this month, in fact. I was just looking back at some of my Facebook memories, and I think this was either Game 5 or 6 of that Rangers series. The Rangers, in a similar scenario, were returning home for Game 5. It was the whole Marty St. Louis and his mother passed away, and the Rangers rallied around that. And as much as we might roll our eyes at that sort of thing, apparently it helped spur New York on. But that Penguins team was hanging by a thread for much of that season. That was Dan Bilesma's last season. That was Ray Shiro's last season. So speaking of end of an era and hoping for not a similar result, obviously, at this point. But that series didn't look like this series, where the Penguins have taught the Rangers a few lessons. And the Rangers, I think, are not learning these lessons because the second period looked like a team totally out of its league, out of its depth. And it's so funny because remember way back in Game 1 in the first period, the Rangers were running around. Ryan Reeves and that fourth line for New York was causing all sorts of problems for the Penguins. They couldn't get out of their own end. And now here we are, not even a week later, 6 days later, and the Rangers can't get out of their zone, and they're coughing the puck up left and right. And unlike the Rangers in Game 1, the Penguins, for the most part, took advantage of the edge in play and just kept the pedal down. They got a couple of deflection goals late in that second period to keep it from getting a little hairy going into the third. How about 2 goals for the Rangers off of Mike Matheson's skate blade in this series? So he's got 1 for the Pens and 2 for the Rangers, I suppose you could say. But I don't want to get on him too much. That's just terrible luck. And the Rangers at 5-on-5, last I checked, had 0 high-danger scoring chances per natural stat trick, and the Penguins had 17. So they're getting inside of the Rangers. They're beating them through the neutral zone at times, but they're also beating them on the turnover and then the quick counterattack, which isn't even really a counterattack because the Rangers can't get it past the blue line at times. And then suddenly they're breaking down. And I think part of it is just it's an emotional game for New York, and things aren't going their way. They were rolling late in the regular season, for sure, playing much better than this. And now Gerard Gallant's got to wonder, what switches can I pull? What can I even do to turn this thing around? And to answer your question, Pittsburgh Sports all the time, I would go with Alexander Georgiev. It's not like, no offense to Louis Domingue, but it's not like the Penguins or the Rangers have a tweener guy that is their backup. They have Georgiev, who for a little while was considered the Rangers' goaltender of the future. Not so much anymore, of course, when you have the Vezina winner, or presumed Vezina winner, in the crease in Shesterkin. But Georgiev, I think, can get the job done, and the Rangers just might have to do something, I don't want to say crazy, but a little bit drastic to turn things around, give them an emotional lift. As far as I'm concerned, the Rangers have nothing to lose if they turn to Alexander Georgiev in game number 5 on Wednesday back at MSG. In fact, that's what I would do, just because I don't feel like there's that big of a drop-off. Christian Kozmak says, great overall game, looked faster and more physical, and that appeared to be what sprung the offense. We did see more board play, more board battles. The Penguins stuck with that. They did not try to protect that lead like they did on Saturday. This time around, they kept the pedal down, as I said. And for the Penguins, this is not a team that's going to back out of the offensive zone if they're defending a lead. They want to have the puck to defend the lead, or at the very least, keep the puck in manageable areas. And outside of maybe 1 or 2 odd-man rushes they gave up in the second period when things were getting rather wild up and down the ice, I think they managed it really well. And speaking of lessons learned or not learned, the Penguins learned their lesson from Saturday. And for a team with this much experience, it shouldn't take more than one hiccup like Saturday when they coughed up the 3-goal lead to make adjustments and make improvements and move on from there. As for the Rangers, they're banging their heads against the wall. And their forwards aren't back-checking well enough, and their defenders are not communicating well enough. And I think right now they're also probably thinking, well, our goalie usually makes a few more of these saves, and he's not. I don't want to pin too much on Shesterkin, but the Mark Friedman goal was a real stinker. That's 2 games in a row where Shesterkin has allowed one that, as our soccer friends would say, was a real howler, one that you don't expect a guy of his caliber, a player of his caliber, to allow. But the Penguins have done this before to Vezina winners in the postseason. Remember, they lit up Sergei Bobrovsky in 2017 on their way to the Stanley Cup championship in the first round. And then way back in 1990, 96, the Penguins were all over Jim Carrey. Not that Jim Carrey, but the other Jim Carrey. The much lesser-known one, because after the Penguins chased him from the net and forced Olaf Kolzig into his first NHL action, we never really heard from Jim Carrey again in the NHL. So it has happened before, different iterations of the Penguins. I don't want to expect that just because the flightless foul is on their chest, they're going to be able to do this, but it looks like they're doing it again and turning the tables, flipping the script against a presumed Vezina winner in this case, in Igor Shesterkin. And the crowd's doing its part too. It's been fun to hear the chants ring out from across my device screen. It's been really enjoyable to see people looking like they're having a lot of fun at PPG Paints Arena, which is a departure from, well, I guess last year was limited crowd, and the Islanders spoiled the party for the second time in 3 years. But it feels like a long way from that right now, and it could be that one last run for the Penguins. It would be fantastic. Again, it looks like my internet feed is a little bit slow tonight, and so if you're just seeing me in fits and starts, I apologize for that. One improvement I have made is I got my old ring light back, so if it looks better lighted, that's because it is. Funny how much better I look when I'm not lit like a wanted poster, but neither here nor there. Steel Dictate says, let's go. Igor. Always good when the goalie has a chantable name, isn't it? Walt Flanagan says, honestly, the best thing possible, finish the series out in 5 and get those injured guys back. while the other teams slug it out for 6 or 7 games. Can't disagree with that. I heard Jared Bednar of the Avalanche talking. I was listening to NHL radio on my my Sirius XM receiver this afternoon, and he was saying, well, yeah, sometimes it can build up some rust if you blow through a series quickly, but you just want to get through it, and you never want to assume anything, and I feel like that's an obvious thing to say, but we'll reiterate it here. Yes, finish this as fast as you can, regardless of if it's Shesterkin or Georgiev between the sticks for the Rangers in a couple of days. Eric Malucky, are the Penguins actually this good of a team, or will they have false confidence if they do indeed make it to the second round? Well, you could say that about any team, right? Will the Avalanche have false confidence if they sweep the Predators? Same deal for the Capitals if they upset the Panthers. By the way, the Panthers came back to tie that game in the third period, so they're going to overtime. We have not had that much OT in these playoffs. A lot of scoring, plenty of goals, but sometimes a lot of goals means that you don't get a lot of close games. So that's been the case so far. But Caps and Cats going to extra time. But the Capitals could very easily be there. But, Eric, to more, I guess, fully answer your question, it's hard to say, right? But I think we all knew the Penguins had this in them. At one time this season, they won 18 of 20 games. So, and we all know when they get that forecheck rolling and when they play Sullivan hockey the way he wants it to be played, they can look as good as any team in the league, at least for short spurts. And, well, when you pop in a few goals in those short spurts, then you can make it look like tonight. And I think it's almost a perfect storm in this first round right now. I don't expect, if the Penguins do advance, them to do this to other teams. But the Penguins haven't won a series in 4 years, so beggars can't be choosers. And we're not going to look this gift horse in the mouth and reject it. I think all of us are rather enjoying seeing the Penguins have some fun in the playoffs, and as a result, we're all having a little bit more fun watching it. Gaming with Geo says the pressure the Pens were able to put on the Rangers looked a lot like the last 10 minutes of last night, but for a lot longer. It was a serious carryover, for sure. And I know Mike Sullivan was effusive in his praise of his team for bouncing back from blowing that 3-goal lead. It's kind of like damning with faint praise at times in a situation like that, but I think he was serious about that. And I was serious that I was impressed, too, that the Penguins found a way to turn that Game 3. And we might look back at that Sidney Crosby shift where he got a couple of chances, what was it, about 13 minutes to go? Maybe 12 minutes to go in Game 3, and then we started to see the ice tilt because the Rangers had a couple of power plays. In fact, they got one right after that, I think, and the Pens killed it off with ease, and then Heinen scored a squeaker on Georgiev, and the Pens were completely dominant from there. And tonight, they took a little bit to get going, but Crosby pounds in the power play goal, and can we just say thanks, give thanks to whoever you prayed to at night, that Chris Letang just put that puck on net, got it there, and then Crosby pounded it in. It wasn't anything terribly fancy or beautiful on the power play. Those plays can open up, as we've seen, but first you've got to do the dirty work. You've got to win the pucks on the forecheck. You've got to get them back to the point, get shots through, and that'll force the teams then to come out on you, and then that'll open up some space underneath, and then you can go to work there. That's usually how it works. And a bonus for Sid to pound that one in for his second goal of the series, and now I believe he has 9 points in 4 games. Kind of thought we were past these days for Sid when he was going to get double-digit points in a playoff series, but I am not complaining that those happy days are here again. This is right up there with that 2010 Ottawa series. It'd be hard to top it. I think Sid had 13 points in 6 games against the Sens in the first round that year. It might have been the best playoff series or the most prolific series I ever saw him play. And, well, he's not quite there now physically, but technically, tactically, mentally, he's totally locked in. And it's really fun to watch at age 34, almost 35. And still showing the youngsters what he can do. And it's a lifetime of dedication for Sid. He's been in perfect shape, had some bad luck with injuries for a while, and still has fought through that. And when you play the way he plays, not shying away from the high traffic areas, there are going to be injuries. So it's nothing that he could really prevent. And now here he is appearing to be at full strength, or as at full strength as you can be at year 17 in the NHL. Yeah, he's going to get past 2 decades before he even gets to 40. So start him early, and he has essentially maintained that level outside of maybe 1 or 2 years when injuries cropped up. Steel Dictate reminds us of Johnny Cueto in that moment. I don't know if it's quite to that extent. That Cueto moment still is singular for me in the fact that I really do think he dropped the ball because the crowd was chanting at him. But, Igor isn't exactly rising to the occasion at PPG Paints Arena, has he? He looked nervous in the first period of Game 3, and he should be nervous, right? It's his first NHL playoff action. This is not some unbeatable Dominik Hasek figure, at least not yet. Maybe that'll be the case down the line, but you never know how players develop, and especially goalies. We cannot figure out this position. It's so difficult. Christian Kozmak says, who comes out when 8 and 67 are healthy? Brian Dumoulin apparently is not skating yet, so he might be a ways off, and I'm not even sure where that injury occurred, because we all thought it was a healthy scratch. It was at before Game 2. So I don't know if we have to worry about that one right now. The easy answer is Mark Friedman, right, because he's been their 7th defenseman all season long. So I guess I'll go with that. As for Raquel, I think you probably drop Brian Boyle. He's been okay, but Raquel can bring so much to the table, and Jason Zucker is skating great. You're not going to pull him out of the lineup, obviously. And, even on down to Evan Rodriguez. You might have said his name prior to his 3-point outburst in Game 3. So if you're talking wingers, which you would be, if Raquel comes back, which I don't think he's going to be back for Game 5, but if there is a Game 6 or a Game 1 of the next round, if the Penguins are so fortunate to win another one here in consecutive fashion, then, yeah, Raquel will be in, and I would put him with Malkin and hope that Malkin is starting to find his form. Good to see him get that goal, but also some quality puck touches in that third period. I tweeted requesting that, and I guess my requests were answered. Again, from whoever you say your prayers to at night, because Malkin was in on the forward check, creating turnovers, and a beautiful connection there. Kapanen, Kasperi Kapanen had another solid night. More direct play from Kapanen is what we need to see from him. And it's funny what the playoffs can do sometimes. For some players, it can make him play worse. For other players, maybe Kasperi Kapanen, it can make him play a little better because they are forced to simplify due to the simple speed of the game. And Kapanen's a fast player, don't get me wrong, but maybe he can get lulled into relying on that foot speed in the regular season. Here in the playoffs, with the intensity up and everyone skating hard every shift, then I think he's forced to cut out the frills and just try to get pucks to the net and maybe not necessarily shoot everything, but just focus more on being direct and getting between the circles, between the dots. We've seen him deke out a couple of defenders. He can do that. He's got the ability. That's what's made him such a frustrating watch this season because so many times he would get in the zone and pull up and try to do something unrealistic out near the blue line, the last place you want to try to do it, and then trigger the counterattack back the other way. Steeler Nation, 412, says hello, and he says, I feel it is our year. Let's not go that far, but as Josh Yohe, my former colleague, put it in The Athletic the other night, it seems like the Penguins are starting to believe that they can make a run in these playoffs. And I believed it for a long time this season until late, but maybe it was just a team that was bored with the regular season. I don't know. A team that knew it was in the playoffs. And a lot of times you just can't generate that urgency artificially. Maybe you just need the situation in the playoffs where the stakes are high, and that's what makes you flip that switch. I hate to use that cliche, but it really does look like it, doesn't it? And now the Penguins and the Rangers have played parts of 15 periods in this series. And I think the Penguins have been the better team for, 13 of those periods? Second period of Game 3 certainly belonged to the Rangers. And then the first period of Game 1, maybe one of the overtime periods, the Rangers were pretty good in that Game 1 marathon win. But outside of that, the Penguins have deserved this series lead. And I'm not saying they deserve to have swept it by now, but 3-1 sounds about right when you just look at how things have played out on the ice. And I don't know if any of us expected that with the way they finished the regular season. So the Penguins are making liars out of a lot of us. And, of course, the series isn't over. But to this point, we look wrong in saying that that late season lull was going to haunt them and harm them in the playoffs. And, of course, we still thought that it was at least going to be Casey DeSmith in the net. We were all worried about DeSmith and his ability to anchor the team to a playoff series win. Well, if he were in net throughout this series right now, we wouldn't even be thinking about Casey DeSmith. But because it's Louis Domingue and we didn't know what to expect, and we've been pleasantly surprised by his play. Tonight, not a lot that he showed us. As he said after the game to ESPN's Emily Kaplan, I had nothing to do with this game. I wouldn't go that far, Louis, but it certainly wasn't like Game 3 or Game 1, for that matter, when he had to step in the most difficult of situations, which might have just helped him turn his brain off. And now he's playing on athletic ability and reading the play pretty well. Look, obviously, Louis Domingue is not the best mover out there. A lot of times he's flinging his body left and right. But it's a big body, a big frame, so that's going for him. The glove on the right hand is a nice X factor against opposing shooters. And the glove's pretty sharp outside of, the one goal that Vetrano blew past it in Game 2 late. And even that was a pretty good chance. We haven't seen that glove look porous at all. I suppose Panarin put one past his glove in Game 3, but that was right by his ear. That was a good shot, and I'm not sure a lot of goalies would have stopped that, even from a standstill like Panarin was shooting. Otherwise, we've seen a lot to like from Louis Domingue, despite the fact that sometimes it looks like he's hanging on by a string. But, hey, we rooted for Marc-Andre Fleury for 15 years, so we know what that looks like at times. Got a little more control late in his career, but especially early in his career, we're used to that goaltending roller coaster. Hey, and speaking of Fleury, I think this is the first playoff series in 10 years that the Penguins have played where it really feels like anything can happen out there. And even when it was 4-1, it didn't feel like the horse was out of the barn and the Penguins had won the game. Of course, the Rangers ended up getting a lucky goal to make it 4-2. Then the Penguins stretched that lead out to 4 goals by the end of the second period. Then I felt pretty good. But this is reminiscent of that Pens-Flyers series where both teams are getting some decent looks. Or at the very least, you feel like any shot has a chance to go in. I suppose tonight the Rangers didn't get a lot of quality chances. But just because of the Domingue factor, nothing against him again, he's been pretty solid. Got his save percentage back above 900 with today's performance. But overall, it's the third-string goalie, a guy who hasn't stuck in the NHL. So, yeah, you're holding your breath, or at least you should be, I think, with every shot that the Rangers take. But maybe the Rangers should be holding their breath now, every shot the Penguins take, too. So, fortunately, so far, the Penguins have gotten the better of the Rangers, and they've won those pivot points in these games. Certainly, Game 3, they won the big pivot point. Tonight, start of the second period, it was 1-1, and anybody's game, obviously. And the Penguins just hammered that throttle, and it was impressive to watch. At times, 4 lines rolling, and looking a lot like 2016. I'm getting some 2016 vibes. I said it after last game. I'll say it again tonight because my feelings and my observations remain the same. And just the goaltending adds some flavor to it, doesn't it? It's, no pun intended with Louis the Chef between the sticks, but it does make it more interesting when you have that third stringer in there. Tristan Jarry is skating, by the way, did not practice with the team this morning at morning skate. So maybe the weekend at the earliest, and the Pens might not even need him, by the weekend. Ricard Raquel skating in a no-contact jersey today, so I'd wager he's probably 2 games away at the earliest as well. So this is the squad right here. If I were the Penguins, I would expect to just be rolling with these 2 guys and go from there, or rolling without these 2 guys and go from there for the rest of the series. And hey, so far so good. There's no reason to be lacking for confidence or anything like that. I want to check on some out-of-town scores. Of course, in the Eastern Conference, we had a chance for all 4 series to be tied 2-2. Instead, the Pens have taken a 3-1 lead. And it looks like the Panthers have just won in overtime. Wow. So was it Sam Reinhart who scored with about 3 minutes left to tie that game? And now the President's Trophy-winning Cats from South Florida have prevailed about 5 minutes into OT. Let me see if I can grab the game-winning goal for you. Carter Verhaeghe scores the winner. So the Panthers now get to return home with the series tied 2-2 after getting wiped out by the Capitals in Game 3. Interesting series. We've seen a couple of blowouts, and now we've seen 2 tight ones, one go each way. And I guess this series has reminded us that the playoffs are a completely different beast. The 2 series that I'm talking about right now. This one with the Panthers trying to prove themselves in the postseason. Not a lot of guys with playoff experience outside of Patrick Hornqvist and Claude Giroux and I suppose Sergei Bobrovsky, but not the good kind of playoff experience for the most part. And then you have the Penguins and the Rangers, which is starting to give me some 2007 Penn Senators feelings, isn't it? In fact, the series is playing out exactly as that one did because the Sens won Game 1, not in triple overtime, but they won Game 1 and dominated Game 1. And then the Penguins came back, won a close game in Game 2, and then the Sens won 3 in a row, as you'll recall. It was the first trip to the playoffs for the Crosby, Malkin, Letang Penguins, Fleury Penguins. Throw him into that core at that time. And wouldn't it be funny if if the last playoff appearance of these big three in Pittsburgh is just the opposite of their first playoff appearance, where they're the ones showing the way in the playoffs. And, hey, maybe they're the ones making a run to a cup final. Wouldn't that be a blast? Long way to go there, because I feel like anyone in the East could win the conference. But that also kind of makes the door open for a team like the Penguins, doesn't it? Because there's no clear favorite here in the East. Walt Flanagan says, Louis has that wild devil-may-care style that reminds me of the 80s and early 90s goalies. I think that's a pretty good comparison. It's not the most technically sound goaltending I've ever seen, and he's certainly not the type of guy that's going to close off everything along the ice. He feels like he's going to have to get his torso in the right position, is what I'm saying. He's not going to make a lot of athletic saves. I don't think that he's that strong in any particular area. Well, I know he's not that strong because he just hasn't shown it at the NHL level. Obviously, he's a very good goalie, but compared to his NHL brethren, he's probably ranking in the 60s or maybe even the 70s or the 80s. If you threw all the guys who played in the NHL this year, yeah, he's probably in the 80s or the 90s if you had to rank them all on ability level. But here we are. And the funny thing about goaltending is we always talk about in this sport, goaltending is so important. It is important, but a lot of times you can't predict who's going to come up big with a performance and who's not, just because goaltending is a naturally passive position. At least that's my theory on it. I would say it's kind of like hitting in baseball, but I think even more so, just because the shots can come from all angles. A lot of times you can have an easy night as a goalie, and it's nothing you did necessarily, and you can get the shutout. You really don't have to work that hard. Or you can give up 5 goals, and you could play brilliantly. So it's a weird position. Over the long haul, and I'm talking multiple seasons, you see the cream rise to the top. But in these short series, in these tiny sample sizes that are the Stanley Cup playoffs, and especially a 7-game series, best-of-7 series, a guy like Louis Domingue can outplay an Igor Shesterkin, and we're pretty close to saying that's the case right now. Even with, that's so funny to say after Shesterkin stopped 79 shots in Game 1, but maybe some attrition is also going on here. Shesterkin had a heavy workload this year. I know he didn't play the last 2 games of the regular season. Maybe that was an indication, though, that he was a little gassed at the end of the year, and you couldn't blame him, because how the Rangers played tonight in that second period was a lot like how they played early in the season, except they got a few more saves and they built up some confidence. So they're regressing, are the Rangers, back to their early season form, and that's great news for the Penguins. Other out-of-town scores right now just getting underway. Colorado already ahead of Nashville 1-0 with 8 minutes to go in that game down at Bridgestone Arena. And Calgary and Dallas scoreless. And Calgary would be a shame if they lost, because I've been intrigued by their performance all season long, but I also don't want a Darryl Sutter team to win. So I'm rooting for Dallas. And honestly, if you're going to root for a team that wants to shut it down and play chess on ice, I think I'd rather pull for the Stars than the Flames, just because I don't want to give a Darryl Sutter team any kind of confidence and get them rolling. I've just never been a fan of the guy and the way his teams play. Yes, they control the puck, but for the most part, they drain the life out of games, and for me, that's just not a fun type of a style of play to watch. And I know some may disagree, but I think a lot of you agree with me. And just look at this series for the Penguins. They've now scored 14 goals in the last 2 games. They have, 20 goals in the series. 20 goals in 4 games. None of us saw that coming. I can confidently say that. All right, last call for comments here. I'm going to go check Twitter and see if anyone has sent anything to me. Big news today in the NHL, by the way. Lou Lamoriello firing Barry Trotz. I think that's a huge mistake. I think Barry Trotz did a nice job this year. The Islanders had to play, 13, 14 straight games on the road because their arena wasn't ready? Talk about a mistake there. Who was responsible for that, by the way? How does that even happen? I don't know, but then they still dug their way out of that huge hole. They were close to last overall in the East for a while, maybe just ahead of Montreal at the start of the year, and they just missed the playoffs by a few points. So maybe Barry's happy to get out of there. Lou seems like he's lost his touch, no doubt. Mikey G on Twitter says the Pens have pretty much locked the Rangers down defensively since they got the 5-4 lead in Game 3. The last 4 periods are almost exactly how the Penguins would have scripted them. And when you can impose it like that, I like your chances, and you still have some high-end talent like the Penguins do, then you're going to win a lot more often than you lose. Matt Popchak has some statements. He's got a long statement on Twitter. Hi, Matt. Remember all the stuff I said the Pens needed to do, especially in front of Igor, to pull this off? Well, they're doing it, all of it, and the proof was in the pudding tonight. Also, Sullivan is coaching the pants off Gerard Gallant, and I like Gerard Gallant. You knew the Rangers would come hard tonight and again on Wednesday. This is their season. But while I think they have the talent to surmount 3 games to 1 down, I just don't see the intangibles. Those are squarely on the Pen side right now, including the most important one, experience. Can't disagree with you there. And I feel like they have the edge in the series to the Pens. They're not relying on goaltending or anything like that, anything unsustainable. They have just had more shots, more chances. They have defended better in key spots than the Rangers have. And they're just playing pretty close to their best. As epitomized by the 7-2 win tonight. That's right, 7-2, and nearly everyone gets in on the act. Thanks again for watching Pittsburgh Postgame. And Walt reminds me before I go, Pierre Maguire got his ass fired, to use Walt's words, in Ottawa. That didn't last very long, did it? I suppose with Eugene Melnyk passing away, things are probably going to change in Ottawa, and probably for the better. Not to besmirch a dead man that quickly after he passes, but it just doesn't seem like Eugene Melnyk made very many friends and probably wasn't a good guy. So I kind of hate when we take the or put on the kid gloves when a person that we know that was probably abusive in some form or fashion, it sounds like that Melnyk was in the workplace. We have to act like he was some great guy just because, or great woman because they pass away, because they die. That's just not right as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, I don't know how I got on that tangent, but we'll cap it off with that. My thoughts on the deceased. And, well, the Rangers are pretty close to being deceased. There we go. I tied it right back in to the series. And the Pens will go for the 5-game series win Wednesday at MSG. If not, they've got Friday at home against the Rangers at PPG Paints Arena. But I know and you know, and they know, they'd rather not have to have it come down to that and have the Rangers start to roll downhill and build a little more confidence up. Keep the pedal down, keep the foot on the throat would be all of our advice to them, and that's what they're going to try to do. Rest, recoup, recover, and get on that charter jet out to New York for the short flight and try to put a fork in the Rangers because it seems like at this point they're almost begging for it. Talk to you next time on Pittsburgh Postgame. Like and subscribe to Pittsburgh Sports Live. Talk to you later.